I got a little wisdom for your ass today. Preach balance, provoke thought, promote open-mindedness. Wisdom is your perspective on life, your sense of balance. What if we can magnify our own lens of perception? Bob Marley said wisdom is greater than silver and gold. That's what I'm about. Seek wisdom, develop oneself, attack life, and get it. I'm the wisdom dropper. Hello and welcome to the Wisdom Dropper podcast. My name's Daniel Bronze and I've got a little wisdom for your ass today. It's episode number 5 and this is the first time I get to speak and talk about a person on my podcast. And I mentioned this in my About Me episode as a part of my format. I'm going to talk about a person, people, someone that has achieved great things, that has walked this earth, might be still alive today, that has some great attributes or qualities that we can learn from. And the way I look at it is, as an analogy or an example, is say I was 6'6" and very athletic. I'd probably want to become a basketball player just because that's my favorite sport. I've always loved basketball. And to develop my skills, I'd probably want to look at the best players in the world today and look at what they do that makes them stand out. So for example, if I wanted to become a better ball handler or a dribbler, I'd want to study Kyrie Irving's game and see what he does during trainings. Or if I wanted to become a better shooter, I'd look at Steph Curry and the drills and techniques and try to learn from him. And I think the same tactic can be applied to all the other dimensions in our life. And we can look at great people that have lived, that have walked the earth, that are still alive today, and we can find what sets them apart, what's made them successful, and we can kind of pick and choose what we want to take on board and develop ourselves. And that's why I want to talk about people and great people that are inspiring and motivating, people that provoke thought as well or promote open-mindedness. It's only going to help us in a positive way. And so, who is my person that I have chosen to speak about? You might be surprised by this. I kind of am, because I thought, my first person's probably going to be like Muhammad Ali or Michael Jordan or someone like that. I'm in my man cave right now and I've created a little wall of motivation on one of my walls, and I've just got all these people that inspire me and motivate me, like those two that I mentioned, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bob Marley, Bruce Lee, and LeBron James, The Rock, Kelly Slater. But I'm not talking about any of them. Maybe I will one day. But the person that I have chosen to speak about is the last Queen of Hawaii, and her name is Liliuokalani. And I think the reason she's kind of popped up into my mind when I was trying to think about who's the first person I'm going to speak about is because me and my wife recently went on a trip to Hawaii, and I thought, I'm flying on the plane, I'm going to download this audiobook about the history of Hawaii. And it got me really interested in her story. And then I came home and I watched a YouTube video. I'll probably share that in my show notes, the link to that, if you guys want to check it out. But when I came across her story, I was kind of impressed, or her story really stood out to me, what type of woman she was. And I think she's pretty amazing. She's pretty cool. And I think being half Māori myself, which is the indigenous race of New Zealand, I can kind of feel for my Polynesian cousins in Hawaii and their story and relate in a sense to that history, and it's a sad history. But I think we can take a lot of positive things away from the story of Liliuokalani. And I also have a bit of a close connection to Hawaii myself. My koro, my grandfather, lived over there and helped do building work and things like that over there. It's also where I went to university for 3 years and met my wife, Summer. And I also conceived my son there. Yes, another podcast, another day. But anyway, let's get into this. And I think I need to kind of set the scene by sharing a little bit of history about Hawaii. And this is going to be challenging for me. I'm not a good storyteller, even though I have my own podcast and I probably going to be sharing stories all the time. I need to get better at this. I think I just get too caught up on the details sometimes, and it ends up just getting confusing and all over the show. But I'm going to try to break down a little bit of the history as simple as I can put it. So yeah, let's get into it. I think there's probably 5 main events or main moments that kind of led to the downfall of Hawaii. And when I mean downfall, I mean by the native people losing control of their country to the Americans or the more wealthier, richer American people that settled there. Okay, so key moment number 1. The king's wife gets converted to Christianity. So King Kamehameha, the great conqueror, the man who unified all the islands, passes away, and his favourite wife is baptised by the Christian missionaries. And because of this, a lot of the old customs and traditions are kind of thrown out the window. And even things like the hula, it wasn't seen as very Christian-like, so it became forbidden to do things. So that was a big shift. Years go by, and then the third king, so this is moment number 2, King Kamehameha III allows foreigners to purchase land and to also become chiefs. And he did this against the will of a lot of native Hawaiians. And because of this, he saw most of the land ownership go into the hands of foreigners, as the idea of land ownership was so foreign to the native people, and they saw land as being everybody's and had a close connection to the land, and that was taken away from them. And the king died a sad man as he saw this happen, and it was a huge regret, as he writes about as he passes away. Okay, a third key moment was when the missionary families had 2 options. So the funding had dried up, and they could either go home back to America or they could stay in the land in Hawaii. And many of these families saw Hawaii as a great place to live, and they saw potential in the industries there, the sugar plantations and pineapples and things like that. So a lot of them decided to stay and became very successful. And you'll see why that becomes a huge moment in the history of Hawaii. And then the 4th key moment, the US government does a bit of research about the naval bases, and a naval officer discovers Pearl Harbor and writes a report about it being one of the best natural naval bases that he's ever seen. And so that gets huge appeal from the American government. Okay, so those are 4 key moments there that were going to kind of lead up to where Queen Liliuokalani comes into play. So her brother actually becomes king. The direct bloodline from King Kamehameha actually dies out, and so her brother, being a military leader, ended up winning the election to become the king of Hawaii. And this is King Kalakaua. You might be familiar with that name if you've ever been to Hawaii. It's the name of the main street along Waikiki. And he was an awesome king. He brought back a lot of the traditions. He brought back the hula. He brought back, the hula, and revived the aloha spirit. And, he built monuments of the kings. He built Iolani Palace, the headquarters there. So yeah, I look at him as being an awesome king, kind of restoring the culture to Hawaii. But a key moment happened when the renewal for a treaty came up, and the Americans wanted a little alteration in this treaty. They wanted the rights to build a military base on Pearl Harbor. King Kalakaua declined, and soon after this, these big, from the old missionary families that had kind of established successful and wealthy land ownership in Hawaii, like the Dole Plantation and the Castle. I think he was in the sugar industry. These guys built a reform party, and they didn't like what the king was doing. They wanted more power. They wanted to take over the government and have more rights over the monarchy. So they started a small army, a group of armed men, a militia, and they stormed the palace, held the king at gunpoint, and forced him to sign a constitution, which gave, pretty much the foreigners to rule over the country and make all the decisions. So he was held at gunpoint, forced to do this. He goes away to the mainland America, and I think he passes away on the way back home. And this is when his sister, the last queen of Hawaii, the lady that I'm here to talk about, becomes the queen. So Liliuokalani becomes the last queen of Hawaii. And the Reform Party, or the American leaders, have said, she can become the queen, but she's going to do what we say. She's a woman. We've got all the power now. We're going to call the shots. So she can just sit on her throne and look pretty while we run the country. But this is where the story gets pretty fun. The queen has other intentions. And so she takes matters into her own hands and tears up the Constitution. Boom. That's pretty thug life. And it shows a lot of courage and bravery. And that is one of the attributes that I have taken from this lady that I think is pretty cool. She's just this little lady, and she's standing up against these big, rich, wealthy American landowners with guns and all types of armed forces. And she just tears up the Constitution and takes power back by doing this. But eventually the Reform Party call her treasonous, after everything that they'd done to her brother, holding him at gunpoint to sign a constitution. And she was faced with this hypocrisy. And this continued, they took power back. And then that leads me to the next impressive quality that this lady shows, and that is that she never gives up. And she decides to go to the mainland, to Washington, D.C., and talk to the president of the US. And so the president sends somebody over to Hawaii to see what's going on. He reports back to the president saying, yep, this is illegal, this is immoral, give power back to the Queen. And however, the Reform Party back in Hawaii don't agree with that. So they say to the president, if you want to give power back to this lady, you're going to have to send troops over and forcefully take it from us. And the president, he's not going to force American troops to fight other Americans. So that doesn't happen. But she still doesn't give up. She fights, and eventually she's even put in house arrest, and she just never gives up fighting to bring power back to the monarchy and back to the people of Hawaii. And that was a huge thing that I took from her story and respect about her. And then the third attribute that I wanted to share was the love that she had for her people. She saw that she was against, crazy odds, and she kept hope, but she knew that it was eventually going to happen. And then when there was a new president, the new president was all about, military control and wanted to build a naval base on Pearl Harbor. And that's when the whole annexation question came to place. And even though all the native people of Hawaii were against annexation, the US government still did it. They forcefully took over the country illegally. And this information wasn't actually known until 100 years later in 1998, when a record was found and made public with pretty much virtually all of the native Hawaiians signing this treaty in support of Queen Liliuokalani against annexation. And I found it just crazy that this record was hidden for 100 years, and the ancestors, the descendants, of these people didn't know the truth until 1998, 100 years later. And just the love that she had for her people, the pride in her culture, makes me think about, my culture and my roots, and, how proud I am of, both sides of my family, my Dutch side and my Māori side. And, just her last remarks when her country had been annexed by the US in 1898. She declares to her people, "Alas, my beloved people, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. Aloha, aloha, aloha." And, She fought to the very end. She never gave up. She had courage and bravery to fight against, this huge power. And, that's what I respect about it. And I think it's pretty cool. When I went back to Hawaii just recently and when I lived there, 10 years back now, the culture is so strong and the aloha spirit is also very strong. And I think it's because of this lady, Leleʻuokalani, and even her brother, King Kalakaua, that brought back this aloha spirit, and their influence has been passed on through generations. Even though they felt at the time they failed, it did push through these negative times and this oppression from another nation. And it is still inside that country today, inside the native people, inside the Hawaiian culture. And, I've seen it. And there's a huge amount of pride in Hawaiian culture. And when you go there, you can see it. And I just wanted to share a little bit about this lady. It's somebody that you might not have heard much about or know too much about. But, it was a story that kept coming up in my mind. I was like, I feel like there's a reason I keep thinking about the story of this woman. I need to share it in my podcast. And so, maybe it was meant for one person out there to find a bit of pride, to find an example and some lessons to take away from this great lady. And, that's my thoughts about her. And I think she's amazing. And, just another side thing, and that's just to be open-minded. I know that it's easy to have thoughts of negativity when you hear things like this, history. There's a lot of bad stories kind of being squashed in history. But I love learning about history, and I gain like a perspective and understanding. But I'm huge about letting that stay in the past. If anything, I want to, you forgive, but you don't forget, and you just gain a perspective about different cultures. And if anything, you can kind of take away from it is to be open-minded towards other cultures and to treat other cultures, other people's beliefs the way that you want them to treat yours. And the perspective that you want them to have yours is just an open-minded one. And I think that's a good way to wrap up this podcast. And I hope you enjoyed it. Get it. If you would like to follow my journey or connect with me online, check out my blog, www.wisdomdropper.com. I'm also on social media, Instagram @DanielBronze_, Facebook and Snapchat @The Wisdom Dropper. Have a great week.